An ice sculpture stood in the center of the square, for passers-by to admire. However, as the temperature rose, the statue's fingers began to ooze blood. Soon, blood began to drip from other parts as well. At this point, the onlookers realized that this wasn't an artwork at all. It was made from a living person. Everything was exceedingly bizarre. It seemed that a conspiracy was brewing. That night, Donshio was walking down the street. As he passed by a narrow alley, a van suddenly stopped beside him. Then, a man got out of the vehicle. He kept asking if Donshio had good vision. Immediately after, he launched an attack. Donshio hurriedly dodged the axe, but he was knocked unconscious by someone suddenly appearing behind him. Who were they, exactly? Why did they want to abduct Donshio? At this moment, in a laboratory, the unconscious Donshio was tied to an operating table. A black market doctor in a white coat picked up a scalpel and sliced open his chest. Then he used bone shears to break the sternum. After that, he removed Donshio's 2 eyeballs, but he didn't expect these 2 eyeballs to stare at the doctor, like they had vitality. The doctor was also horrified by the gaze. Just as he was looking puzzled, his phone suddenly rang. The doctor hurriedly answered the call. He negotiated the transaction details with his employer. It turned out to be an organ trafficking operation, but at this moment, Donshio's open chest sprouted countless tentacles. They quickly healed the wounds on Donshio's chest. Before long, Donshio sat up and walked towards the tray containing his eyeballs. He fumbled and picked up one of them. Then, a bizarre scene unfolded. Countless tentacles extended from the eyeball and its socket. They tugged at each other, successfully restoring the left eye. The doctor watched in horror. Then he was so scared that he peed. Donshio, still adjusting, was startled by the doctor's scream. He ignored installing the other eyeball and crashed through the window, jumping out. That very night, the doctor walked into the dump with 2 bags of body parts. However, just as he was about to destroy the evidence, the garbage bag suddenly started to shake violently. Immediately after, severed arms and limbs burst out of the black plastic bags, grabbing the fleeing black market doctor. A tightly clenched fist was raised high, then it slowly opened to reveal the eyeball inside. In the next moment, the doctor woke up from his nightmare. He kept murmuring the word connection. It turned out to be just a dream he had, but could things truly be that simple? The next morning, a statue appeared in an open space of a neighborhood. Passers-by stopped to admire it. Mei Yan, on her way to work, couldn't help but stop to take a photo. Then, the scene from the beginning unfolded again. At this moment, a one-eyed man in the crowd was staring at the statue, but when he saw the police arriving, he immediately turned and left. The one-eyed man was Donshio, who had been deprived of his eyes. Why was he here? Then the coroner conducted an autopsy on the statue. They discovered that the victim had not been dead for long. Moreover, a strange symbol was carved into the skin. The police suspected this was a unique mark left by the murderer, because every artist leaves their name on their completed work. Donshio had already returned home. He played the guitar in a depressed mood, trying to dispel the gloom in his heart. He never expected that he would lose an eyeball while out for a walk. Suddenly, the sound of a van honking came from nearby again. Donshio couldn't help but exclaim, "Which unfortunate soul is being taken this time?" At this moment, the socket of his missing eyeball suddenly throbbed with pain. Donshio couldn't help but rub it a few times. In the next moment, a strange image appeared before his eyes. A luxurious desk was filled with various colored pens and artworks. It seemed to be from the perspective of an artist. Donshio quickly covered his intact eye, but strangely, the image didn't disappear. This time, he could more intuitively and clearly sense that someone was sitting at a computer, searching for information on the 12 zodiac signs. Among them, the symbol representing Aquarius contained a symbol resembling the letter P. This was identical to the mark on the female statue. Donshio seemed to realize something. His eye had been transplanted onto the other person, and a connection had formed between the two of them. He could see everything within the other's field of vision, and this person must be related to the statue in the morning. Donshio wanted to get his right eye back, but he felt powerless. Not only because he was just an ordinary person, and it was hard to locate the corresponding target, but also because his physique was unusual. He had possessed powerful healing and regeneration abilities since childhood, even if his ear was cut off, and would quickly restore to their original form through the connection of tentacles. But because of this, he was often called a monster. Meanwhile, another human sculpture appeared in the square. This time, it was a male figure filled with steel pipes. Strangely, the police were unable to extract any relevant information from similar cases. The murder method was too intricate and clever. The investigation was momentarily at a standstill. At this time, Sheriff Taijun looked expectantly at his senior Chui, and asked if he had caught any useful clues. It turned out that Chui's grandmother was a powerful witch, and he himself had a special ability. Whenever he sensed a clue related to the case, he would involuntarily have a nosebleed. However, this time, Chui had no leads at all. In desperation, the police could only start investigating the resin material applied to the bodies. On the other side, the leader of the organ trafficking organization learned of Dongxiu's powerful and strange healing abilities. He sent his trusted men to capture Dongxiu for research. That night, Dongxiu encountered the kidnappers, who had abducted him again. He ran wildly, trying to escape, but the other party was numerous and powerful, and quickly cornered him in an alley. Dongxiu fought back with all his might, which gave him a glimmer of hope. He desperately ran across the street. At this moment, Mei Yan saw Dongxiu running. She rushed out and pulled him into a narrow alley. Then she pointed out an escape route for him. Although Dongxiu didn't know this strange girl, he chose to trust her. But he never expected that this would turn out to be a dead end. Then Mei Yan appeared again. She approached Dongxiu and took out a knife, slashing his knee. Blood immediately gushed from the wound. However, in the next second, fine tentacles emerged from the wound. Watching the wound heal rapidly, Mei Yan revealed an eerie smile, as if she had been waiting for Dongxiu for a long time. Meanwhile, the footsteps of the kidnappers grew closer. Dongxiu struggled to stand up, preparing to flee for his life. Unexpectedly, Mei Yan grabbed him and threw him down from a height. Dongxiu crashed onto a car below. He fell severely this time. The car was even dented from the impact. Dongxiu quickly stood up and fled forward, watching his figure gradually fade away. Mei Yan once again revealed an eerie smile. Who exactly was she? What was her connection to Dongxiu? The next day, the third human sculpture appeared again. The square was crowded with onlookers. They raised their phones to take pictures. From the form of the sculpture, it was clear that the murderer's methods had become increasingly brutal. A boy's arms were severed, and he was posed in a kneeling position. Blood was oozing from the severed joints. Meanwhile, Dongxiu's eyes ached violently once more. Before him was a strange woman and a huge stone statue. He felt that this place was very familiar. After careful recollection, he realized he had seen that bustling shopping mall building while recycling old appliances. At the same time, the murderer who had received Dongxiu's right eye also sensed something this time. His eye throbbed with excruciating pain. What on earth was happening? By nightfall, the pain from Dongxiu's eye intensified. This time, he saw a notebook covered in various sculptures, and a strange symbol resembling the letter P. Dongxiu felt a sense of familiarity, so he quickly began searching online. Looking at the photos of those human sculptures online, he became even more certain that his right eye was with a perverted murderer. Therefore, the next day, Dongxiu went to that square. Was he hoping to encounter the murderer there? Meanwhile, the police discovered Dongxiu's voice while reviewing the scene's data. Looking at this gloomy man with evasive eyes, Chui left behind a line of nosebleeds with his foresight. The team members were overjoyed upon seeing this. The case finally showed some progress. Dongxiu became their prime suspect. The crisis was quietly closing in on Dongxiu. How would he defend himself next? Nali was an ordinary company employee. She had a crush on her gentle and refined senior, Zhen Yu, to attract his attention. She racked her brains to strike up conversations with him. She didn't know that the man before her was the person the police were searching for. At noon, Nali went out for lunch with her colleagues. She encountered a strange man in the square. His right eye was hollow and terrifying. Staring at her, Nali was so frightened that she turned to leave. But in the next second, the man chased after her and said some incomprehensible words. She was terrified inside and quickly found an excuse to escape. The man was Dongxiu, who had come to the square looking for someone. The first investigation didn't go well. Dongxiu felt very frustrated. At this moment, the murderer Zhenyu was dining in a restaurant. He elegantly took a sip of water. Then he looked around at the pedestrians in the street. Through the window, soon he pinpointed his next victim. But at this moment, Zhenyu's eye suddenly throbbed painfully again. It turned out that Dongxiu was accessing his field of vision. This time, Dongxiu not only saw Nali's face, but also saw the name of the shop through Zhenyu's eyes. Dongxiu immediately got up to search for the shop. He didn't know how long it had been. Finally, he found the restaurant at the end of the street. However, fate was ultimately this way. The two strangers brushed past each other, and Dongxiu only found Nali inside the shop, so he quickly approached to ask where the person sitting across from her had gone. However, at this moment, Nali thought Dongxiu was a stalker, and refused to answer any of his questions. After the lead was cut off, Dongxiu could only check online for updates on the case. However, he found nothing. Just as he was at a loss for what to do, a horoscope ad suddenly popped up in the bottom right corner of the webpage. Dongxio keenly noticed that this was extremely similar to the star chart he had seen from the murderer's perspective. He sought out a horoscope reader to ask about the meanings of the symbols on the chart. The reader explained that these symbols represented different planets, and the symbol resembling a P represented Pluto. Upon hearing this, Dongxio mentioned several dates when the sculptures appeared. He asked if they were related to Pluto. After checking, the reader found that these were all dates when Pluto was in conjunction with Venus, and Venus represented the demon Lucifer. Dongxio suddenly understood. He quickly asked the reader to predict the date of the next conjunction. That day would surely be the time when the murderer would strike again. Meanwhile, Zhenyu was working on his next piece, but he didn't expect that Nali would knock on his door alone at night. Seeing the beautiful woman coming onto him, Zhenyu naturally wouldn't refuse. After an in-depth conversation, Nali happily left the bedroom. She wanted to see Zhenyu's living environment to gain a deeper understanding of his preferences. As she looked around the living room, a chill crept into Nali's heart. Fate was such a coincidence. She barged into Zhenyu's studio. It was filled with paintings and sculptures. At this moment, a notebook marked with symbols caught Nali's attention. She carefully began to flip through it. The chill in her heart continued to grow. The humanoid sculptures drawn in the notebook were exactly the same as the ones she had seen in the square that day. Just as Nali was about to continue flipping through, she suddenly felt an urge to look up at the door. What would become of her fate? The police investigation also made some progress. They brought in a horoscope reader to confirm the meanings of the symbols on the sculptures, and calculated the time of the next conjunction. Upon learning that Dongxio had also inquired about this matter, Shui immediately became alert. He didn't believe that an ordinary person could think of questions related to horoscopes. Shui hurriedly sent someone to find Dongxio. Soon, the police discovered his figure on surveillance near Dongxio's home. However, before they could begin their investigation, the fourth human sculpture appeared in the suburbs. This time, it was no longer a young girl, but an elderly woman. The police immediately rushed to the scene. They found that the sculpture was indeed engraved with symbols representing Pluto. Meanwhile, Dongxio was also hiding in the crowd, watching, but he didn't expect that the man who had kidnapped him that night was also there. The man chased after Dongxio. The police also noticed the commotion in the crowd. Seeing Dongxio appear at the scene again, Shui immediately led his team to give chase. The man behind him pursued relentlessly. Dongxio jumped down from a height. Unexpectedly, he was blocked by the man's accomplice, as a fist was about to smash into his face. But in Dongxio's eyes, this swift punch seemed to move in slow motion. He easily sidestepped it. Then, his strength surged, and he knocked the man to the ground. Dongxio looked at his hands in astonishment. He had no idea why he was like this. Had his body undergone alienation? Just then, the man who had kidnapped him appeared behind him. He swiftly raised an axe to strike Dongxio's forearm. However, the eerie strike occurred once again. Countless tentacles emerged from the severed end, pulling the forearm back into place. Seeing Dongxio's powerful regenerative ability, the man nodded in satisfaction. Just as he was about to take Dongxio back to the organization, he was knocked out by Mei Yan. She quickly took Dongxio and fled the scene. After they reached a safe place, she left her number for Dongxio, and advised him not to act rashly lately. But Dongxio only wanted to quickly find the murderer, and get his eye back. He completely ignored Mei Yan's advice, and returned to the square that had appeared in his vision. Nali also saw the news on the bus. She opened her phone to search for reports, and was horrified to find that the sculpture looked exactly like the one in Zhenyu's notebook. Nali arrived at the company in a daze, but didn't find Zhenyu's figure, so she sought help from her close male colleague Mingxuan, and hoped he could assist her. However, what happened next was truly shocking. She arranged to meet Zhenyu on the company rooftop, and confessed that she already knew his secret. At this moment, Mingxuan was hiding nearby, ready to record, but he was a terrible ally, and forgot to silence his phone. The phone rang, which instantly revealed his location. Zhenyu no longer pretended to be someone else. He knocked Nali unconscious, and then launched a crazy attack on Mingxuan. He then pinned Mingxuan at the edge of the rooftop, attempting to push him off the building. But just then, Nali's phone suddenly rang. The music caused Zhenyu's eyes to suddenly sting. At the same time, Dongxio downstairs also sensed something. He covered his painfully throbbing eyes, and saw the murderer grappling with the same man. He tried to continue searching for him, but was shocked to find that his body was beginning to move uncontrollably. Dongxio moved his feet with great difficulty, but it was ultimately too late. He could only watch as the murderer pushed the man off the building. At this moment, Nale also regained consciousness. She pleaded with Jinyu to spare her, but he was utterly inhuman. Jinyu snapped the woman's neck and attempted to extort her but was killed in return. He only hoped she would be smarter in her next life. At this moment, the phone's ringtone abruptly stopped. Jinyu's eyes no longer stung. He instantly realized that his anomaly might be related to this music. On the other side, Dongxio's eyes also returned to normal. He recalled the scene he had just witnessed and vowed to catch the murderer. Then he slipped into the office building. Mei Yan quickly followed behind him. On the way, Dongxio deduced from the discussions of other colleagues and found the office area of the deceased, but after looking around, he couldn't tell who resembled the murderer. Just then, a man holding a coat walked past him. Dongxio immediately recalled the scene he had seen then. The murderer had a similar coat in his hand, so he followed him into the restroom. Seeing someone washing their hands, he approached without hesitation and questioned him about where he had hidden the coat, but he didn't expect that the male employee didn't have a coat at all. Dongxio then realized he had mistaken the person, but he was very certain he hadn't made a mistake. The man with the coat had indeed entered the restroom, so where could he be hiding now? Dongxio deliberately spoke loudly about the secret of the human sculptures in an attempt to lure the murderer out, but Jinyu remained calmly standing in the stall. Dongxio climbed up to the top of the stall. He reached out his hand to try to catch the murderer, but he was pierced in the palm by the other party's pen. Meanwhile, the male employee returned to the restroom with security. They pinned Dongxio to the ground. Taking advantage of this position, Dongxio saw the leather shoes in the compartment looked like those of a murderer. He quickly reached out to grab them, but unexpectedly, Jinyu saw the process of the tentacles healing the wound. Such an eerie scene shocked even the usually calm Jinyu. Immediately after, the security intended to escort Dongxio to the police station. Fortunately, Mei Yan appeared just in time to rescue him. On the other side, Nale's colleague Xiying informed the police that the man with the eye patch had stalked Nale. Thus, they suspected he was the murderer. However, after reviewing the surveillance footage, they found that Dongxio had a solid alibi, but Cui couldn't help but bleed from his nose upon seeing Mei Yan's figure, so they went to the office building to look for clues. At this moment, Jinyu's eyes changed again. He actually saw the scene of Dongxio's eyeball being removed. At this moment, he realized that Dongxio had seen the whole process of his murders in this way. Jinyu immediately became intrigued. However, before he could ponder further, the police arrived at his workstation to question him. Jinyu was initially very cooperative, but when Xiying tried to assist him, he became very impatient. Cui noticed Jinyu's odd behavior. He deduced that Jinyu was very concerned about his personal space and was an extreme narcissist. He only gets annoyed at those who help him, and even makes no secret of his disgust. Someone like this had triggers completely different from those of ordinary people. Cui couldn't help but feel suspicious of him. On the other side, Dongxio brought Mei Yan back to his home and asked her why she had rescued him multiple times. Mei Yan then told him that she had been searching for someone with regenerative abilities because she had been saved by such a person when she was a child. Mei Yan wanted to find her savior and repay him, but no one believed what she said. It wasn't until recently that she discovered someone was searching for the urban legend of the connection, so she disguised herself as a novelist to communicate with them, but she found out it was an organ trafficking organization. Fortunately, she took the opportunity to install listening devices in the office. This allowed her to learn about Dongxio's whereabouts. She also learned that this regenerative ability was related to Jiangdo Pharmaceuticals. That is Korea's top pharmaceutical group. Mei Yan speculated that there must be secrets hidden behind this. So, she invited Dongxio to investigate the truth behind it together. But Dongxio only wanted to stop the murderer from killing again. He then shared all his recent experiences with Mei Yan, but he didn't expect that she not only believed everything he said, but also wasn't afraid of his hollow right eye. Meanwhile, the police issued a wanted notice. Now the entire city was searching for the man with the eye patch to avoid being discovered. Mei Yan switched Dongxio's eye patch for sunglasses and advised him not to go out recently. Meanwhile, she continued to investigate the murderer's trail, but Dongxio had already vaguely sensed that the murderer seemed to know about the connection, because whenever his eye began to sting, he could hear that the murderer seemed to be listening to his song. It seemed that his right eye was reacting to his own voice. As Dongxio considered how to respond, Jinyu had already taken the initiative. It turned out he was already suffering from a terminal illness. Thus, he desperately needed Dongxio's regenerative ability. He inquired everywhere for information about the song's creator, but found nothing. The organ trafficking organization also discovered Mei Yan's listening device. In desperation, she had to withdraw. After returning to Dongxio's home, The two exchanged their information. At this moment, Doshio's right eye throbbed with pain again, but the next scene sent chills down his spine. He actually saw his own portrait in the notebook. In addition, there were 3 humanoid sculptures resembling girls. At this moment, Doshio understood that this was the murderer's next killing plan, but how could he stop the murderer? He didn't realize this was a trap set for him by Genyu. In the evening, Doshio got off work and went home as usual. As he passed by a busker's stand, he couldn't help but stop to admire. The busker was covering one of his songs. This deeply moved Doshio, but his eyes started to hurt intensely again. Unexpectedly, what he saw this time was his own silhouette. Doshio suddenly turned around and found a silver gray van parked behind him, and the murderer was sitting in the car. Watching him, a smug smile crept across his lips. Doshio desperately ran after him, but he was stopped by a patrol officer on the roadside. Then Officer Chui appeared and took him back to the police station for questioning. Faced with the police's suspicions, how could Doshio prove his innocence? Meanwhile, Genyu had arrived at the doctor's operating room. He smashed the doctor's head open, threatening him to reveal all the secrets of the right eye, but the doctor claimed that he was only responsible for the surgery and knew nothing else. Genyu wasn't so easily deceived. He tied the doctor up tightly and picked up an iron rod, preparing to smash his head in. The doctor immediately shouted for him to stop. He said he could reveal everything he knew. It turned out that after Doshio escaped from the operating room that night, the injured Genyu burst in. He begged the doctor to help treat him and told the doctor that he was already in the late stages of cancer. As long as he could extend his life, he would allow anything to be done to his body. Seeing Genyu so compliant, the doctor agreed to help him. Then he conducted a bold experiment and transplanted the right eye that Doshio had not had the chance to take away onto Genyu's body. Unexpectedly, a connection was truly formed. The doctor continued to explain that this was a live transplant technology from Jiangdo Pharmaceuticals. Once the experiment succeeded, it could potentially achieve immortality. And now, within Genyu's body, there was a part of the function of immortality. This wasn't a bad thing for Genyu, who was in the late stages of cancer. But as soon as the doctor finished speaking, Genyu killed him instantly. Then he clapped and laughed, but his laughter was truly chilling. On the other side, Doshio told the police he could see from the murderer's perspective. The next target was 3 little girls, but Sheriff Taijun didn't believe his nonsense, thinking the other party was just playing with the police. He wanted to teach Doshio a lesson, but he was stopped by Chui nearby. In his view, Doshio didn't seem to be lying. Chui then cleared the interrogation room. He candidly told Doshio that he didn't think he was the murderer and believed everything he said, but he needed Doshio to provide proof. Seeing that someone was willing to believe him, Doshio was immediately moved beyond words, so he led Chui to the rooftop to demonstrate his regenerative ability. He effortlessly removed the handcuffs from his wrist. In the next moment, his palm automatically regenerated. Doshio thought this would be enough to prove his innocence, but he didn't expect that Chui wanted to make this public, to give the public an explanation. This made Doshio feel disheartened. He couldn't understand why the world couldn't treat him kindly. Taijun discovered through reviewing the files that all of Doshio's identity information was fake, and it was impossible to legally prove his existence. This made Chui even more suspicious of him. Seeing that they still doubted him, Doshio didn't want to dwell on it any longer, so he replicated the action and removed the other handcuff. Then, disregarding Chui's warning shot, he jumped off the rooftop. Chui was stunned on the spot until he watched Doshio gradually disappear. Chui finally reacted and led the team to chase after him, but by the time he ran downstairs, Doshio had already vanished. Mei Yan learned through her investigation that the organ trafficking organization had sent a member named Xiao Yu to follow the murderer. After the eyeball transplant surgery, she immediately called Doshio, but the call didn't go through. Mei Yan immediately realized that he might have been captured, so she decided to track Xiao Yu alone. But at this moment, Doshio, who had escaped from the police station, called. However, the ringtone alerted Xiao Yu. Mei Yan tried to continue following him, but was held at knife point in the back. Clearly, Xiao Yu underestimated Mei Yan's combat strength. In just a few exchanges, he was easily killed by Mei Yan. Meanwhile, to prevent the murderer's next plan, Doshio arrived at a local elementary school and set fire to a homemade Molotov cocktail. Then he called the police station from a public phone, claiming he would set fires in all the elementary schools in the city. Chui learned of the news and immediately ordered that all elementary schools be closed. But could this really stop Genyu's killing plan? After doing all this, Dongxuo's phone suddenly received a notification. Originally, his original work had been adapted by a popular singer. The singer even left him a message, hoping that he would like the new version of the song. Dongxuo felt both excited and moved upon seeing it, but at this moment, Zhenyu reconnected through the song. Dongxuo quickly shared his perspective. Originally, Zhenyu learned from his phone about the closure of all elementary schools, and immediately realized that Dongxuo wanted to stop him, so he proactively shared his perspective, and wrote down his phone number on the phone screen, for Dongxuo to see and call him. At this point, a direct confrontation was inevitable. Dongxuo dialed the number without hesitation, but he didn't expect the other party to tell him that setting fires in elementary schools was pointless, because he had already started the next phase of his plan. Dongxuo was provoked by these remarks. He declared that he wouldn't let him succeed. Zhenyu merely smiled disdainfully, then he hung up the phone. The next morning, Mei Yan arrived at Dongxuo's home, and told him it was no longer safe here. Then she took him back to her home. Although Mei Yan reiterated that she would help him get his eye back, Dongxuo still couldn't easily trust her. To alleviate her concerns, Mei Yan voluntarily revealed her secret. It turned out that she and Dongxuo were of the same kind. At this moment, Dongxuo felt as if he had found a sense of belonging. Two lonely monsters had found their kind. From then on, they were not alone anymore. The two of them cut their palms to connect with each other. At the moment, their hands held tightly together. Their feelings rapidly intensified. Meanwhile, Zhenyu's plan had not yet stopped. He disguised himself as Dongxuo, and found the popular singer who adapted the song, and injured the person, pretending that Dongxuo deliberately came to seek revenge. In the next moment, Dongxuo woke up from his sleep. He saw Zhenyu give up killing the girl, but instead kidnap a middle-aged man. It was the singer who had adapted his work. The man was covered in blood, and had symbols representing Pluto carved on his body. Dongxuo immediately realized that the murderer had not given up. This was his next target. So this time, could Dongxuo stop the murderer in time?
죽여버릴 거야.
Mei Yan decided to follow Dongxuo to stop the murderer, but at this moment, the two of them discovered from the surveillance footage that the organ trafficking organization had already found this place. They quickly prepared to escape through the back door. However, Dongxuo's phone received a video. Another group had kidnapped his adoptive grandfather, so Mei Yan urged him to go save his grandfather first. She would stay behind to deal with the group outside. Although Mei Yan had a stun baton, but the other party has a large number of people. She was quickly surrounded. How could Mei Yan manage to escape? Meanwhile, Dongxuo finally arrived at the recycling plant, but he found that his grandfather was already on the brink of death. Dongxuo rushed forward to check on him, but in the next moment, he was knocked unconscious by a blow. Then his hands were chained up. Even though they had captured Dongxuo, the organization still intended to kill his grandfather. Dongxuo was instantly filled with rage. He knocked over the man who was restraining him from behind. Then he engaged in a struggle with two others. Although Dongxuo's hands were bound, his strength was now unlike before. After killing one of them, Dongxuo directly operated the cutting machine to cut the chains off his wrists. Blood splattered with sparks flying everywhere. His hands were bloodied and mangled, but they quickly healed back to normal. After freeing himself, Dongxuo's combat power surged. He knocked the enemies to the ground, and quietly approached his adoptive grandfather. But unexpectedly, the old man looked terrified. He mumbled the word monster. Dongxuo's heart sank instantly. He recalled his childhood, when he had exhibited his abilities, and was called a monster by his peers. It turned out that even those closest to him would inevitably feel fear upon seeing his abnormalities. At this moment, the enemy behind him stood up again. Taking advantage of Dongxuo's distraction, he delivered a heavy blow to Dongxuo's head, but he was no match for Dongxuo. Seeing the enemy lying on the ground, Dongxuo raised the hammer and prepared to kill him, but in the end, he didn't want to kill in front of his grandfather. Meanwhile, Mei Yan was also captured by the organization. They pressed her for Dongxuo's whereabouts. However, Mei Yan refused to reveal anything. Seeing this, one of the henchmen slashed her face with an axe, but Mei Yan still wouldn't speak. Instead, she deliberately changed the subject, claiming that Xiao Yu and the black market doctor were both killed by Zhenyu. The organization's boss Hunter sent people to investigate. At this moment, Mei Yan's wounds suddenly healed. Hunter finally realized that Mei Yan also had a connection. Looking at this cash cow before him, he became so excited that he stuttered incoherently. Mei Yan seized the moment and kicked him over. Then she broke through the others and jumped down to escape. After treating his grandfather's wounds, Dongxuo bid him farewell. and told him he wouldn't return here again. But just as Dongxio was about to leave, his grandfather suddenly called out to him, and told him to run away quickly. Don't worry about the affairs here. He would be responsible for dealing with the aftermath. Looking at his grandfather, who had raised him for many years, Dongxio felt an immense sense of reluctance, but to avoid putting him in danger, he could only turn away with tears in his eyes. As soon as he walked out of the recycling plant, he saw Mei Yan waiting outside. A warmth surged in Dongxio's heart. He told Mei Yan that although he was not understood by the world, he was still willing to give everything to help others, and he wanted to protect the people around him from harm. Mei Yan comforted him after hearing this. Having special abilities wasn't their fault. Compared to ordinary bodies, their existence as new humans was far more remarkable. If they were willing, they could even change the world. Since the world refused to accept them, it's better to create a new world ruled by connectors. These words shocked Dongxio, but he didn't believe that just the two of them could overturn the world. However, Mei Yan told him that there were other connected ones in the world. They would meet soon. At this moment, Dongxio felt a sharp pain in his eyes again. Zhenyu changed the time and place of their meeting. Dongxio decided to go to the appointment immediately. Mei Yan also reminded him that this time he must completely end Zhenyu. Then, Dongxio appeared at the agreed location with a dagger. But unexpectedly, Zhenyu got out of the car fully armed. He pressed a switch, and in the next second, gas spread through the alley. Dongxio was choked and couldn't catch his breath. Seeing that Zhenyu was well prepared, Dongxio charged at him with all his strength, but before he could swing the dagger, he collapsed to the ground. The gas irritated his respiratory system, making it hard to breathe. Watching Dongxio convulsing continuously, Zhenyu slowly walked over to him. Then he placed his hand on Dongxio's chest to feel his heartbeat. Soon, Dongxio stopped breathing. Zhenyu's expression became extremely fervent. However, not long after, Dongxio's heart began to beat again, but it was still very weak, and he had no strength to resist. When Dongxio woke up again, he found himself tied up in a car. Dongxio angrily questioned Zhenyu about why he was killing innocents. Zhenyu replied that because his time was short, he wanted to take strangers with him to the grave. This reason was simply absurd, but Zhenyu didn't care. He narcissistically claimed that their meeting was destined. So many people around the world happened to have him transplant Dongxio's eyes. From the moment the connection was formed, the two of them became a community of fate. Therefore, he had to obtain Dongxio's physique to escape the fate of death. So what awaits Dongxio next? Mei Yan swiftly dealt with the person following her. Then she found another connected one. The other person wore a terrifying mask, and was several inches taller than the average person. Mei Yan told him that they would no longer need to live in hiding.
짓밟아버리자고.
Meanwhile, Dongxio had been taken to a secret warehouse by Zhenyu. At this moment, the corpse of the black market doctor hung in midair. His mouth was gagged with a mouth restraint, and his hands and feet were nailed to a wooden board. He looked exactly like the drawing in the notebook. It turned out that this was Zhenyu's new plan, although it was clear that he was a psychopath. Dongxio was still shocked by this brutal scene. He quickly asked about the singer's condition, but Zhenyu didn't want to answer his questions. Instead, he invited Dongxio to merge with him, to survive. He wanted to exchange his mutated organs with Dongxio's, to confirm his hypothesis. Zhenyu pushed the singer forward again. Then he cut off the fingers of both the singer and Dongxio. Immediately after, Dongxio's severed finger extended a tendril, and tightly connected with the singer's wound. Even more surprisingly, the singer's severed finger could also connect with Dongxio. Zhenyu's eyes became even more frenzied. He wanted to merge into one with Dongxio. If Dongxio refused, he would turn the singer into a new body sculpture. The organ trafficking organization was trying to find Dongxio and Mei Yan, but unexpectedly, Mei Yan brought her companions to visit. As soon as the man appeared, everyone was stunned in place. Someone tried to step forward to fight, but was kicked away. Then Mei Yan teamed up with him to defeat the enemies thoroughly. In the end, the organization's boss was decapitated and killed. At this time, Dongxio had been locked in a cold storage by Zhenyu, watching the singer who had suffered because of him. Dongxio felt immense guilt inside, but unexpectedly, the singer showed no intention of blaming Dongxio. He even felt it was his own fault that Dongxio had been captured by the murderer. The singer then slowly lowered his head and stopped breathing. Looking at the deceased singer, Dongxio's heart finally shattered completely. He vowed to personally kill Zhenyu. Immediately after, he used all his strength to break free from his restraints, but his hands were torn apart. However, Dongxio didn't care at all. After all, he had powerful regenerative abilities. Then, He desperately slammed into the cold storage door. The loud crashing sounds caught Jinyu's attention. He couldn't help but marvel at the power of the connector. Meanwhile, Mei Yan and her companions also found their way here. She heard the sound of Dongxiu hitting the door, and immediately followed the source of the sound to find out. Just as she was about to open the door to free Dongxiu, Jinyu rushed out from behind with a knife. Mei Yan was caught off guard, and was cut on the back of her hand. However, the wound quickly healed back to normal. Seeing there was a new connected one, Jinyu became even more excited. He even wanted to have offspring with Mei Yan. This disgusted Mei Yan greatly. She directly mocked him for not being worthy. Jinyu was instantly enraged, and lunged forward with the knife. The two exchanged blows, unable to determine a victor, but Jinyu had the advantage in strength. He quickly found an opportunity to kick Mei Yan down the stairs. Fortunately, the connection swiftly helped her restore her body. Mei Yan struggled to stand up, and prepared to continue the battle. Jinyu slowly walked down the stairs, preparing to finish her off. However, at this moment, the sound of a car suddenly came from outside. Originally, the police had found this place based on clues. Jinyu had to put down the knife and deal with the trouble outside. Mei Yan seized the opportunity to rescue Dongxiu. Then, she urged Dongxiu to kill Jinyu himself, and she reminded him that the future of the connected ones must change. She then left alone. Meanwhile, Chui and Taijun split into two teams, and quietly infiltrated the building from different directions. But as soon as they entered, Chui saw a man approaching with an iron bucket. He raised his hand and fired 2 shots, but he didn't expect that the other person was connected. Just as he was surprised, Mei Yan suddenly appeared behind him. Seeing that Chui knew the secret of the connected ones, she planned to kill him completely. Taijun heard the gunfire, and quickly turned to provide support, but he was killed by Jinyu, who was lying in ambush. Looking at the fallen handgun on the ground, Jinyu bent down to pick it up. Remembering that his time was running out, he slowly aimed the gun at his head, but in the end, he couldn't pull the trigger. Then he walked into a corridor, and called out to Dongxiu in his mind. Soon, the two would cross paths again. The final confrontation was about to begin. Jinyu sang Dongxiu's song again. This made Dongxiu furious. He wouldn't tolerate his song being desecrated by a murderer. But Jinyu's intention was to provoke him, so he naturally wouldn't stop singing. In the next moment, Dongxiu charged wildly at Jinyu. Jinyu also raised his gun and fired at Dongxiu, but the speed of the bullets couldn't match the speed of Dongxiu's healing. Dongxiu endured the pain and rushed towards Jinyu. The last bullet hit Dongxiu's right eye, yet he still didn't stop moving. Just as he lifted Jinyu high, Dongxiu's body began to lose control. Originally, his right eye sensed its presence, and eagerly wanted to return to its owner's body.
내 눈알 내놔.
With his eye back, Dongxiu's power reached its peak. He picked up the long knife from the ground, and prepared to deliver a fatal blow to this heinous murderer. But at this moment, Officer Chui suddenly appeared to stop Dongxiu. Dongxiu didn't want to pay him any mind, but Chui stated that no matter how many people Jinyu had killed, it should be dealt with by the law. He didn't want Dongxiu's hands to be stained with blood, and become a wanted murderer. Then, Chui took the knife from Dongxiu's hand, and urged him to hurry and leave with Mei Yan. But at this moment, the sound of helicopters suddenly roared above them. Mei Yan immediately sensed something was amiss. She quickly pulled Dongxiu to escape outside, but just as they reached the rooftop, several helicopters surrounded them. A fierce battle was about to break out. Meanwhile, Jinyu's eye socket and Dongxiu's severed finger seemed to sense the threat as well. The film ends here. Next, how will Dongxiu and Mei Yan respond? How will the connected ones survive in this world? Perhaps the next season will reveal all the answers. Overall, this show has a very innovative and striking setup. The visual presentation is also commendable. It has a rather extreme representation of the aesthetics of violence. The involvement of a Japanese director has brought a unique perspective on morbid aesthetics to the show. This contrasts sharply with traditional Korean dramas. Friends who are interested can check out the original Film Connect. If you like my channel, please click to subscribe to my channel.